paper said this dream afforded her some comfort in the midst of her despair. Then, on August 3rd, 1947, the right-hand landing gear assembly of an airplane was found on a beach at Cain's Head, about 9 miles south of Seward, by Ed Ground of Seward Baker and Carl Graham, his cousin, while on a hunting trip. The tire was still inflated, and Seward pilot Vern Tiny Kurkowski, and for those, that has been a while since he was around, Tiny was a ironic name since he was a rather large man. He was positive that it came from Dr. Bannister's plane for 3 reasons. Number one, the tire was an 800 by 4 type, and as far as he knew, Dr. Bannister Stimson was the only one carrying that tire size. Ordinarily, the plane carried a 600 by 6 tire. Number two, although the landing gear had been underwater and had rusted, the faint yellow color was still recognizable. And 3, the plane had a special homemade axle for the use of 800 by 4 tires. Hydraulic oil was still dipping from the broken line. Condition of the rust indicated that the gear assembly had been submerged in water for a long time and could have easily drifted a long way down the bay. The inflated tire caused the gear to float with only a small section sticking above the water. A cliff near the water edge was searched for airplane parts on the theory that perhaps the plane crashed somewhere in the area, but nothing was found. Also, the water off the beach where the gear was found was dragged, and again, nothing was found. There was some uncertainty about the identification of the landing gear. The tire and inner tube showed war surplus markings. Arthur C. Ingram, the head of the Seward Chamber of Commerce Search Committee, thought that Dr. Bannister had not purchased war surplus equipment. Mr. Kurkowski rebutted this by saying the tire and tube were bought from the Pacific Airmotive Corporation, which handled war surplus tubes and tires. Even so, some people remained skeptical that the landing gear was from Dr. Bannister's plane. Part of this comes from difference of opinion on what happened. A lot of people thought, of course, that the ship had gone into the bay, but others believed it crashed in the mountains to the east or to the west, and still some maintained to the north. So, of course, those people did not believe it was in the bay. There was also, this in full disclosure here, it was an interesting idea given to me by a reputable person who I trusted, but he said, some people believe Mr. Kurkowski didn't really believe what he was saying, but he said it for a good reason. And that was that Mrs. Bannister was having some problems collecting on life insurance. Because the company said, nothing's been found. How do we know he's dead? You know, insurance company, he's been an insurance company. And they felt Mr. Kurkowski said what he said to help Mrs. Bannister, which sounds like something would happen in Seward, to be quite honest. But anyway, the point was, there was doubt, let's put it that way. But the Anchorage Daily Times of August 11th, 1947 reported that Seward had, quote, abandoned the slim hope that Dr. Bannister and Harold Roth might still be alive. Neither the plane nor its passengers were ever found. What happened to the plane and Dr. Bannister and Harold Roth on December 26, 1946 is still an unsolved mystery. Mrs. Roth gave birth to a baby boy August 27, 1947, and named him Harold Jr. A service was conducted for Harold Roth at the Sacred Heart Catholic Church in Seward on October 15, 1947. Mrs. Roth started a daycare center that was not very successful. In 1948, she and her children moved back to Minnesota and lived there with her parents. She died January 20th, 2000. Hazel Bannister, Dr. Bannister's wife, and their children moved to Spokane and lived there until she married Arthur Peters of Wyball, Montana, where she lived until her death on June 5, 2008 at age 96. The home in which the Bannisters lived at the time of his disappearance, this is the number, 226 6th Avenue, is now the Sunshine House Bed and Breakfast, operated by Marcia and Mike Gutsky, right across from us over here. Dr. Bannister bought the property in March 1941 from Mr. and Mrs. Forrest Kinney, who had started to build a house on the property, but changed their mind. At the time of the sale, they had completed a basement, framing, and a roof. The Bannisters, who lived in an apartment in the arcade building at the time, planned to finish the house. This is where the fight when they got done there. Of course, as many of you know, the arcade burned in the big fire of November 1941. And now I've got to say, Pat Williams, or Ghost, would be very disappointed if I didn't. I don't know how many times she told me Oscar was wrong, Oscar Watchell. He always said that he had helped rescue Dr. Bannister's piano from the arcade so it didn't burn. But Pat always said, no, it was Dr. Williams' piano that was saved. And I was looking in her autobiography the other day to see what she had to say about Dr. Bannister, and the only mention of Dr. Bannister was that it was not his piano that was rescued, it was Dr. Williams. So I just have to say that. Harold Roth's brother, Jack Roth, came to Seward in 1946, was employed as a cashier of the Bank of Seward, which is also gone. It's amazing, I mean, but it was, for those who have been around for a while, was looking at that little park area where the bus to William H. Seward is. That's where the Bank of Seward was, right next to the current bank. As a cashier, the First National Bank of Anchorage bought the Bank of Seward from the Sweatman family, and Jack was the first manager from 1952 to 1961. His son Jason was manager from 1980 to 1983. Jack suffered another tragic airplane tragedy in 1992. Three of his sons, Jess, Scott, and Kent, along with two of their friends, Tim Thornton and Brian Baker, disappeared over the Gulf of Alaska on May 3rd, 1992, while flying back to Anchorage from Glacier Bear Lodge in Yakutat, where they had been on a fishing vacation. The plane was a Cessna 348 piloted by Jeff Roth. No sign of the plane or the people on it was ever found. And it seems only appropriate to finish here with one more air crash. On July 1st, 1952, Tanya Trukowski was killed in an airplane accident 19 miles east of Chehalis, Washington. He had just bought a new plane in Bishop, California, and was flying to Seattle to pick up his wife and daughter to fly to Seattle. In this case, both pilot and plane were found. It was determined that he did not understand the fuel consumption rate of his new plane, ran out of gas, and crashed into a forested area. Now that I've convinced everybody not to go up in airplanes, we have here Poland Roth, one of Jack's sons, down here. Do you want to say anything to the assembled mob?
Actually, what happened was Leroy, Harold's son, called me this week on Sunday to let me know this was going on, and I did a shout out to all my dad's sons, Harold's brothers' kids, and let them know that this was going on, and they all wanted me to thank you for remembering this event and taking the time to do the research. And I said, well, I'm not going to miss it, so I don't care what the weather is. I drove down to check it out and stuff, and it was rough. But as a family, we still fly. Jason and I are both pilots, and we didn't, we weren't born then, so we didn't know Uncle Harold, but he was legendary, as far as we know, and Dr. Bannister. So, and the family being in Seward from 1946 to 1960. We all, even though we weren't born here, we're still kind of fond of the place anyway. So thank you again for doing the presentation and doing all that research and taking the time. So the family's grateful.
If there's any questions or comments, either way. Nothing. You always say, if there's no questions, that either means nobody cares or you did a great job.
You did a great job. Really, really well.
Did anyone ever drag the bay?
The papers reported that Army ships had dragged, but it's pretty deep.
Yeah, I know it's very deep.
There was, I didn't put it in there, but there was one report that out the bay a ways, not too far from Kane's Head, a fishing boat snagged on something, but it, when it pulled it up was a log. So, but you know, at the time,
Another one of Alaska's tragic stories, you know.
Yes.
The Mount Marathon case
Well,
is
yes.
still unsolved, you know, it never will be probably.
well, sort, I mean, not sort, but Alaska, you know, nature is not forgiving.
Right.
I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
We've all, I'm sure, almost everybody in here has had a friend who's died in an air accident or hunting or hiking or some tragic event. It's just a part of the way things go here. Fishing also on a boat accident. Boat accidents and plane accidents have taken a great toll over the years. Okay, and as I said, I want to make sure that everybody said, this is not, this was for, I'm gathering that when everything is more or less done, I don't know if it's ever done, but done, we'll all get packed up and given here to the museum, for the historical society, whatever you want to say. Okay,
Thank you, Lee.
thank you.
All right, well, thank you all for coming. We'll be having our meeting